Okay, want to share Hadushim from what my great-great-grandfather says in his Sefer Nachla Svi, and about the Makos and the Parsha. So the pasuk says in Perek Vav, pasuk Chavav, Hu Aaron
Mm.
Moshe, Asher Amar Hashem Lahem, V'tziu es Bnei Yisrael Meretz Mitzrayim Al Savosim. Aaron is mentioned first, before Moshe, in the pasuk. The question is, there are other psukim where Moshe's name is mentioned before Aaron's name. Why is that? So Rashi quotes a medrash that says that this teaches us that they're equal. Some explain that this means that their good deeds were equal. Masim Tovim. Comes along my great-great-grandfather at Meshulam Fayesh Svi Gross. In the Sefer Nachla Svi. This is what a used one looks like. Beautiful Sefer. You could get it on HebrewBooks.org for free, Nachla Svi. So he comes along and he says that Moshe, he exemplified the attribute of strength, Gvura. Moshe was all about strength. Whereas Aaron, he exemplified the mido, the attribute of chesed, kindness. Aaron is about kindness. Now, these specializations, right, the specializations of these traits are occasionally interchangeable. In other words, sometimes, even if a person has the midah of gvura, he needs to act with chesed, and vice versa. Pinchas, who's Aaron's grandson, even though he possessed the attribute of kindness, he acted with great strength when he killed Zimri. Zimri, he desecrated the encampment of the Jews when he publicly acted inappropriately with a woman from Moab, Cosby. In other words, Pinchas said, we got to stand up for what's right. So even though Pinchas, as a descendant of Aaron, would typically have chesed, and therefore killing Zimri in this act would seemingly be against his characteristic trait, nonetheless, sometimes a person needs to switch it up. So therefore, Aaron's name comes first, in order to symbolize and signify that sometimes kindness has to take precedence over strength. Whereas Moshe's name comes first in other places to show that it's the opposite, that the Gvura needs to come first. That's what he says over here. His language is Lefi shahaya koyin ubekadei shelo itachshov ki ish yitro lemidas chesed al midas gevura or lahefek ki lepamim tzarich lahaktem avodas Hashem yisbarach midas chesed pamim tzarich lahaktem midas gevura da onuroyim ki pinchas ben alazar al pisha shahaya koyin midas chesed in kol zeh beisha ish sarich likram nikmos Hashem lahar gazimri hislab beish midas gevura bekadei lo di onuzos hiktem lepamim aron moshe lepamim hiktem moshe laharon lahoyos she's manches tzarich lahaktem midas gevura lemidas chesed pamim tzarich lahaktem midas chesed midas gevura. Exactly what I just said. Another piece on page Kuf Mem Ches, he says another answer to this question. Which, by the way, if you look in the Mefarshim, Rashi, Rashban, Ibn Ezra, Kli Yakar, they deal with this. It says like this: Aaron, he was loved more than Moshe. What's the source? Where's this from? Eitzi Yisrael Haya Aaron Chaviv Yoiser. Aaron was more dear. Why? Yanshin is gadoli mohim v'lo yisnava lehem kodem ba Moshe. Aaron grew up with the people. Furthermore, he never got his prophecy before Moshe came along. He was around the people more. Conversely, Moshe didn't grow up with him. Moshe grew up in Paro's palace. And in the eyes of Paro, Moshe was more dear. In the eyes of Paro and his advisors, Moshe was dearer. Because that's where he was raised. That's what the pasuk says. Who are on a Moshe? Hainu kishayim medaber b'nei Yisrael hayamaktim are on the Moshe. So therefore, they would know their audience when they were speaking to the Jews. So then they would have Aaron be the one who's going to speak because he was loved more by the Jewish people. Aval kishemedabrim el Paro who Moshe Aaron it's Moshe kodem Aaron. But when they were speaking to Paro, so then it was the opposite. Then Moshe would do the talking because he had more of an in politically. That's the idea over here. Moshe would do the talking then. So that's basically the idea. A few reasons as to why there's a difference. One could add on this. It says in the first parak, Pirkei Avos, that Aaron is Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, which means that Aaron is someone who loves peace, chases after it. Could be also why he was loved more by the people more, but my great grandfather doesn't suggest that idea. But I think that's a nice add-in. Start going to the meat and potatoes over here. He has a piece on the Makos. And he says like this. It says in this is on page Kufnun. Perik Zayin Pasuk Tes. V'amartel Aaron kach es matecha v'hashleich lifnei Paro. He says, take your staff and throw it in front of Paro. Right. So Rashi explains that why did Aaron perform certain makos, some of the plagues, as opposed to Moshe? Dam, Moshe didn't do it. He didn't hit the water because the water saved him when he was an infant, when he was miraculously saved and rescued by none other than Paro's daughter Basya, and he was put in a basket and floating on water by his mother, because if Moshe would have remained there, Yocheved was worried that the Egyptians were going to kill him, because they made a decree, Kol haben hayored tishlachu v'kol habas tichyun, to kill the first, every single boy. So, therefore, Rashi explains, because Moshe was saved by the water, so therefore, Moshe was not able to be involved with that first makkah, with the makkah of Dam. Water saved him. Kinim, locust, that was blood. Kinim, locust. Aaron performed the makkah. Moshe didn't hit the ground. Why? The ground protected him. Moshe killed a Mitzri who was inappropriately beating a Yid, and Moshe killed him, and then the ground like buried the Mitzri and protected him. And he was originally temporarily saved. It ended up coming out that they ended up finding out about it later, and he had to flee. But nevertheless, the ground still saved him. Based on these facts, the question is, why couldn't Moshe turn the mata into a nachash? He had a staff, and there were nisim that happened towards the middle of the parsha this week. There were what was the miracle? There were a few miracles actually, because the question is, why is that such a chiddush? The Egyptians, they practiced sorcery back then, and they were also able to duplicate and to mimic Moshe's act of turning the staff into the nachash. So there's a few nuances and special nisim and ways in which Moshe was able to outdo the Mitzrim, even though they were able to turn their staves into snakes. Remember years ago, I forget the exact word, I said this, and then one of the guy goes, "That's what I call a staff meeting." But anyways, the point is that there were a few nisim. Number one is that the chiddush is, and there's a whole Torah, there's a lot of Torahs on this, but the chiddush is that Moshe's staff, when it turned into a snake, and then it turned back into a staff, and then it ate the other snakes while it was a staff. Right? That's one chiddush. Another chiddush is the other sorcerers, the Egyptians, Granted, they turned their staffs into a snake. However, it didn't have life to it. It just looked like a snake. Rabbi Galinsky actually goes into this more. It looked like a snake. It's almost like you go to a wax museum. It looks like a person, but if you look closely, it's really not a person. Same exact idea. It didn't have life, whereas Moshe's had life. And another incredible, miraculous nace was that it didn't get any bigger. It remained the same size even after it ate. People will be very happy about that nowadays. That um imagine that people nowadays they would just eat whatever they want and they wouldn't gain any weight. I'm sure a lot of people would be into that. Everyone's into eating now, which is another discussion in of itself. But anyways, so the question is, why couldn't Moshe turn his staff into a snake? For what reason did Aaron have to perform this miracle, this task instead of Moshe? Well, one simple answer is that he would have had to throw the snake onto the ground, and therefore, out of respect to the ground, like by uh by the plague of locusts, which protected him, the ground protected Moshe, so Moshe didn't do it himself. That's a simple answer. Right? But whole discussion about the Makov Sfardea also. But comes along the Nachlas Tzvi and he says like this. Dihine l'chayr, nearly dihine l'chayr hamoife shel hatonin lo hayamakas oynish. Says a chiddush over here, which is this miraculous act of the staff turning into a snake wasn't coming in order to punish the Egyptians, like the other 10 plagues. And therefore, it's not considered one of the 10 plagues. Asher l'chein ein nechshe ben cheshbon shel 10 makos v'lo bo el lahazrias parashiyanish im lo yishmu l'kol Hashem. This only came, the only reason why they did this is to warn power, if you're not going to listen to Hashem, then you are going to be punished. Ubiyois ki Moshe ba'atzmo ne'enash b'mara hanachash al shedibar al Yisrael. And since Moshe himself was punished, right, because he spoke bad about Klal Yisrael, Moshe was punished. Could be that over here, which is a very interesting idea. Seems like Moshe was shown a snake. Seems like Moshe was shown a snake, which is interesting. So this symbolized that he was punished because he slandered the Jews, which is a chiddush. Now, what does this mean? How did he slander the Jews? So the answer is, Moshe said in last week's parsha, Haim lo yaminu li velo yishmu bekoli. They're not going to listen to me. They're not going to listen to my voice. He slandered the Jews. He didn't believe that they would listen to him. Therefore, since he slandered them, Amin aroshu ba'atzmo yasa hamoifesh otanin v'lechina nasa moifesh ali de'aron. And therefore, since the snake symbolized that Moshe was being punished, it wouldn't be fitting that he himself should perform this miraculous act. That's the idea. Another answer to this question, which he says in the next piece, Yesh Lemar Pashat, Ya'an Shegimel Matos Hayu. He says that there are 3 staffs. Mata Eloikim, Mata Moshe, Mata Aaron. There was the staff of Hashem, Moshe's staff, and Aaron's staff. Right now, Va'ata Hayam Moshe Mishtamish V'Mata Eloikim. Right now, Moshe was using the staff of Hashem. He brings actually a proof for this. Pasuk says, "Vayeshev Artz Mitzrayim v'yikach Moshe Mata ha'Elokim." Moshe took the staff of Hashem. Biyado. He quotes this in other places. As Zohar explains that on the staff was Chakuk Shem Hashem. It was carved on, it was engraved the name of Hashem. Therefore, it wouldn't be fitting for Moshe to turn the staff of Hashem into a snake. That's what the pasuk says. That's why he said, Aaron, you do this one. Take your staff. Take your staff, which doesn't possess an intrinsic level of holiness as the staff that I'm going to be using, the staff of Hashem does, and you use that staff. Obviously, the question is, why didn't Moshe use his own staff? Fine. That would be a question on this piece. According to my humble opinion, this coincides beautifully, this stems with another Nachlasvi, back in last week's Parsha. We turn over to last week's Parsha. He has a beautiful piece about this on page Kuf Mem Aleph in a sefer. Vayonos Moshe mepanav. Perek Daled Pasuk Gimel. Moshe, he ran away from the snake. He ran away from the snake. Pasuk says. So, what does this mean? So the Medrash relates. If you look on the Shmos Rabbah on this pasuk, Amram Motronisa l'Rebbi Yossi. A woman told Rabbi Yossi, "My God is better than your God," because when your God revealed himself to Moshe, he didn't run away from him. However, my God, aka the snake, Moshe was afraid of. He ran away from it. What's the answer to that question? Good question. It's kind of like the question, prove God's existence. Which there are answers to. Prove that your religion is the right religion. Which there are right answers to. Rabbi Yossi responded, what do you mean? Hashem is everywhere. You can't run away from Hashem. Hello, malo kolaretz kivoida. Hashem's everywhere. You can't run away from the Eibishter. As we know, the song goes, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem up, down, right, to left. Hashem's everywhere. You can't run away from Hashem. However, from the snake, the person would just walk a few feet away. You run away from a snake. That was his answer. Comes the Nachlasvi and provides a different answer. Moshe Rabbeinu is the master of all of the Nevi'im. He didn't run away from the snake because he was afraid of the snake. He quotes, like it says in the Chayvus Alavavos, that there was one chassid and they asked him, how are you not afraid to be in the desert by yourself? So the pious individual responded, I'm embarrassed to be afraid from anything in this world other than Hashem. Similarly, says the Nachlasvi, Moshe Rabbeinu, for sure, he didn't need to be afraid of, he was not afraid of the snake, and he didn't run away from the snake because he was afraid of the snake. It was only because the snake is so impure. Godel tumaso. The snake is the source of impurity. What caused the first sin in the world. And therefore, Moshe didn't want to be around something so impure. Conversely, Masha'in came when it comes to Hashem, who is the source of all holiness. The closer a person could be, the better it is. With a lot of endearment. Therefore, that's why Moshe didn't run away from Hashem. So just to tie it back in over here, that's the idea over here. Moshe couldn't use his staff because of its holiness and turn it into something unholy, something impure. Similar to over there. Hashem is pure, the snake is impure. That's my own little tie-in from what he said in last week. He says later on page Kufnon Aleph, Pasuk says, Parshas Pasuk Yud Beis, Nate es matra v'haches ha'afar ha'aretz v'ha lekinim. A A lot going on in this parsha. You got 7 makos over here in this week's parsha. So it says over there, Hashem told Moshe, tell Aaron, take out your staff, stretch it forth, and hit the hachas afar, it's hit the dirt of the ground. And then there's going to be lice in the land of Egypt. One interesting question is, by the first 3 makos, the first 3 plagues, they were commanded to use their staff. But the last 7, they weren't. So Kinam is the end, Datsach. Dam Sfardei Kinam, it's the end of the first 3. So question is, why is this? Only use the staff for the first 3 makos, and then the last 7 you don't need. Why not? Good question. Bet you your average Orthodox Jew will have no clue what the answer is. Comes along my great-great-grandfather and he says, Yesh Leimer Dehine Yisa B'Zayar. It says in the Zayar, and he says we spoke about this in many places, including where you mentioned it today. On the staff, it was Chakuk Shem Yukevav Kebechuber Shema. On the staff, it was engraved, it was chiseled on the name of Hashem.
You talk to the always in the morning?
Vas? Ubekoyach Oisa Hashem Nasu Kol Oisos V'Amoisin. It was in the strength of the name of Hashem. That's why all of the miraculous acts were able to occur. Yishloimar Dekivan Shachartumim Lo Rotzu Lahamin Lamoisha La'aron Shekol Oisos Ailu Nasim Ali De HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Chartumim, you translate the word Chartumim. Maybe the wizards, the sorcerers.
The sorcerers, right?
Sorcerers. They didn't want to believe Moshe and Aaron that all of these signs happened through Hashem. They didn't want to believe it. They said it's happened through sorcery and wizardry. We actually discussed this in the past. It's on rabbiblond.com on somewhere in Sefer Shmos over there. They're all titled over there, so you could read it. But that Hashem created Zelu Umozeh Aloikim. There's a whole Torah of the Emes Yaakov that whenever there's prophecy and there's a high level of holiness, there also has to be a high level of impurity, aka that they were able to do all this witchcraft and wizardry and sorcery. Nowadays, we don't have either. We don't have prophecy, so therefore we don't have all the sorcery. Interesting idea. So they wanted to say that it was through sorcery. Therefore, Hashem commanded, no, use the staff. Use the staff that my name is engraved on the staff. So that you will demonstrate properly that these miracles are happening specifically because of Hashem, because of me, and not through witchcraft and wizardry. Therefore, specifically by the first 3 plagues, the staff was needed. Sorry, the sun glare is coming in here. There we go. Therefore, specifically by the first 3 plagues, Hashem needed to demonstrate, and they needed to use staffs in order to demonstrate that it's Hashem. But after this 3rd significant plague, they all agreed and they said, it's the finger of Hashem. They realized that it was Hashem who was involved. Like the Mefarshim explained on that pasuk. So therefore, they didn't need the staffs anymore because they all realized that it was Hashem. Furthermore, we see by the first 3 plagues, the pasuk says that they were able to duplicate the wizards, with their sorcery, they're able to duplicate it. However, by the plague of Kinam, so they were not able to duplicate. And we don't even find that they're able to duplicate the other plagues as well. Therefore, the staff was no longer needed, because they would agree that it is the finger of Hashem. They knew it already. They knew that it was the finger of Hashem and it wasn't through sorcery. Therefore, it doesn't say afterwards, by the 7 plagues, use the staff. What is this idea that it's the finger of Hashem? Etzba Elokim. Hashem doesn't have a body. What does that mean? They said that there's a finger of Hashem. So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Yesod HaTorah, if I'm not mistaken, then the Perek Daled, Hashem doesn't have body, but Dibra Torah Kiloshem Bnei Adam. The Torah is speaking in a vernacular, in a way that we could understand, it. How does the pasuk specifically say the etzba? Why the finger? Like it says by Kriyas Yamsuf, Esayam Hagadoyla Asher also Hashem in Mitzrayim. What's the idea over here? Esayad. Yad Hagadolah, the great hand of Hashem, even though he doesn't have a body part. Yesh Lamer Ikla Tachlis, the main reason for this is Lama Shalach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Al Paro Mitzrayim Es Esra HaMakos. Why did Hashem even perform the Makos to begin with? Why did Hashem do it? Was in order to show, to demonstrate his strength. This is one idea behind the Makos. Hashem sent the plagues to demonstrate, to let the world know how powerful he is. So that the world will fear him and that the Egyptians will send him out. So he says it's Yedua ki lakol achas min hachamesh etzbaos. He says it's known, each one of the fingers has a unique purpose. Ama, Kamitza, Zeres, Etzba, Agudol. Each of the fingers have a purpose. Yeshol Shima Shachar, Be'etzba, Mishtamshin, Laharos, Ba. The Etzba is used as a pointer. When you point at something, it's used to point. That's the etzba. Pointer finger. Therefore, that's why they specifically use the word etzba like him. It's pointer finger. That's what he wants to say. It's on page Kuf Nun Beis. One more piece. It says on page. That's going to be a typo. I got to fix that. Not 146. Must be one. Oh yeah, 146. Sorry, I was on the 50s. Page Kuf Mem Vav, he says.
That's one copy. That's one copy wrong.
He says like this: Hein b'nei Yisrael lo shamu elai. The pasuk says, "Ve'eich yishme'enei paro." So he said, "What's going on over here? If the Jews aren't going to listen to me, how is Paro going to listen to me?" V'aniya aral sefasai, Moshe told Hashem, "I have sealed lips." Rashi over here explains that this is one of the 10 places where the Torah itself makes a kal v'chomer. If you could live 10 pounds, then you could live 5 pounds. I asked my great-great-grandfather, this is a kal v'chomer? This isn't a kal v'chomer. What are you talking about? Makchim alo kal v'chomer pirchehu. You could refute this kal v'chomer. Why didn't the Jews listen to Moshe? That was Mekoitzer Ruach. They were impatient. They were overworked. Umavoida kasha. Because of all the tough work. However, by Paro, that doesn't apply. Paro was sitting in his palace all comfortable. How is this a kal v'chomer? If the people aren't going to listen to me, then Paro's are going to listen to me. On the contrary. Maybe we could answer this and refute this kal v'chomer by saying the people didn't listen to him because they were overworked and they were incredibly tired. But he says, no, this isn't a question. Amnam be'emes yishleimer delav pir chahu dehini yadu. It's known. The word ruach, mekoitze ruach, is a language of prophecy. The pasuk says, "V'nocha alav ruach Hashem." It's a pasuk in Yeshaya, Perik Yud Aleph, pasuk Beis. He doesn't quote that in his sefer, but I looked it up. That's where it is. V'nocha alav ruach Hashem, ruach chachma ubina. He doesn't quote the rest of the pasuk. He just says etc. Pasuk continues, ruach eitza v'gavura ruach das v'yiras Hashem. So the pasuk ruach, spirit, wind, could also mean prophecy. V'hinei b'nei Yisrael shahei lehem b'kabbalah ma'avoiseim hakadoshim shem Hashem Yisbarach rak machmas arichas hagolos v'kishu hashibud. Which means like this: the Jews, they had a tradition regarding Hashem's oneness. However, due to the very long exile and the crushing labor and the impurities in Egypt, the Ruach HaKodesh left them. Because they were sunken into the impurities and the filth, the spiritual filth of Egypt, the Ruach HaKodesh, that prophecy, had left them. They used to have it, but eventually when they spent too much time there, it left them. This certainly applies, certainly it's a kal v'chomer for Paro, who never believed in Hashem. Like he himself said, he testified, Mi Hashem asher eshma b'koilo. Who is this Hashem that I should listen to his voice? So therefore, Paro certainly never had a Ruach HaKodesh. So therefore, the pasuk says, "V'lo shamu Moshe mekoitze ruach" in Shmos, Perek Vav pasuk Tes. They didn't listen to Hashem mekoitze ruach. What does this mean? Machma sheniksoro v'nesmato ruach HaKodesh asher chonsa aleihem. This is due to, it was shortened, it was decreased, the Ruach HaKodesh that originally dwelled on them. In other words, they didn't listen to Moshe because the Ruach HaKodesh decreased. And it decreased because of their work. V'him mesibas ma'avoda kasha, because of their crushing labor that they were doing. In other words, avoda kasha garma lahem shetistalik mem Ruach HaKodesh. It was this very difficult work which caused the Ruach HaKodesh to be removed. Or you could say from the very hard work. It was difficult then for them to serve Hashem. And therefore they didn't listen to Moshe. That's what Moshe was saying. B'nai Yisrael, the Jews, which are a holy nation, and used to have Ruach HaKodesh, and now they don't have Ruach HaKodesh anymore because of the Avodah, and they themselves aren't going to listen to me. Kal v'chomer, how will Paro listen to me who never believed Hashem and never had any Ruach HaKodesh? That's how he answers this Kal v'chomer. Beautiful lamdus. Beautiful idea. How much time is left? 5 minutes. I want to share one idea, brief idea, from Rabbi Yerucham Olshan, Rosh Yeshiva of Beis Medrash Gavoa in Lakewood, in a Sefer Yareach LaMoadim, in Maimer Mem Aleph. Why did Hashem bring the plagues? Hashem could have easily just redeemed them and immediately. Why did Hashem bring the plagues? Simple reason that he brought them is because to take Klal Yisrael out, to redeem them out of Mitzrayim, and to show power, intimidate him. He should send out Klal Yisrael. The Maharal writes about this in a Sefer Derech Hashem on Avos Perek Mission Dal. The obvious question on this is, he could have just sent them out. He didn't need the whole charade, and they didn't need to stay there an extra year with the plague. So then he proceeds to quote a brisker of in the Chedushi, in his Sefer al Torah, Kedusha Maran Yitzchak Zev Halevi. I actually have Sefer here. Whatever. I can get up. I have it ready. So he quotes the Brisker Rav, and based on the Brisker Rav, as well as the Rabbeinu Bachaya and Parshas Bo Yud Beis Chav Tes, Hashem performed the miracles, these plagues, Mida Keneged Mida, measure for measure, to punish them. It was to punish them. We discussed this in the past, how the plagues were Mida Keneged Mida, on RabbiBlan.com. Also, the Tosfos Yom Tov says this. Punish them. But the Brisker Rav says it wasn't just to punish them. It was just to punish them. It had nothing to do with sending them out. Just to punish them. That's the idea. Another reason, which we already alluded to today, is to show the greatness of Hashem, how he could alter nature and the status quo. Those are three interesting reasons I just wanted to share. He continues with this piece. It was to punish the Egyptians and also to stop their kfira, which means their denial of Hashem. So also to stop their kfira. And it was also to increase the belief in Hashem that the Jews should have for him. Those are basically the points that he comes along and says. Look in the whole piece. That's a very, very brief summary of 7-page piece. But it's an interesting question. Interesting ideas. So anyways, hope everyone enjoyed these interesting ideas. And yeah. Have a wonderful day.